A boy with cerebral palsy was considered intellectually disabled for over 20 years. The film, based on true events, begins with a scene at a medical commission where the main character, Mateus, who suffers from cerebral palsy, is brought in a wheelchair. Due to his condition, he is unable even to speak. The action flashes back to 1987 when Mateus was a young boy. He is working with a doctor, placing shapes into corresponding slots in a box. The doctor suggests that he has an intellectual disability, but his mother vehemently disagrees. She believes that Mateus understands everything perfectly, but the doctor hints otherwise, comparing the boy's responses to a dog wagging its tail at the sight of food. The doctor proposes sending the boy to a special institution where professionals can care for him, but the mother refuses. At home, she tries to teach her son to walk, even though her daughter and older son think it's pointless. Mateus moves across the floor on his back and meets his father, who plays with him. In desperation, the parents hire a masseur to help their son. At home, the father interacts with Mateus, teaching him to pound his fist on the table like a real man. The boy's voiceover states that from that moment he was determined to learn as much as he could. The boy crawls across the floor to his mother, wanting her to pick him up, and she, ignoring her daughter, focuses on him. After lunch, Mateus sits on the windowsill, watching the lives of the neighbors in the opposite building. This is how he learns about social interaction. One day, the family receives a package from an uncle in Germany. Among the usual gifts, at the bottom of the box, they find a hairy egg, a coconut. The father opens it using improvised tools, and the family eagerly watches. Mateus learns a lesson about perseverance from this. Additionally, he observes his mother's guests as they come to try on new dresses. One day, when Mateus is watching a program about space rockets, his sister Matilda turns off the TV, angering him. The mother, noticing his agitated movements, turns the program back on, despite the girl's remark that her brother understands nothing. Meanwhile, Matilda asks where her hair clip is. Mateus crawls toward the sofa, making noises. The family tries to calm him, but he's trying to draw attention to the clip that's under the sofa, though unsuccessfully. By 1989, the father shows Mateus the night sky through the window, talking about the stars. In a voiceover, Mateus wonders what his father's job might be. As Mateus grows older, his father builds him a new wheelchair from makeshift materials, a cut-up folding bed and cartwheels. Later, while celebrating Poland's first democratic elections and liberation from socialist rule, the father goes to the store, ostensibly for a new door lock. However, he returns home late at night, drunk. Climbing onto the balcony, he taps on the window to get Mateus's attention. Just in time, celebrating Poles are launching fireworks into the sky. As the boy watches the exploding stars, the father falls from the balcony and dies. Mateus is left with his father's advice to never give up. The action shifts to 1998, one of her suitors, and getting hit herself. Trying to do something, he threw a flower out the window, aiming for the mother's lover. Another time, seeing a man cycling by, Mateus threw dirt in his direction. The man asked why he did it, and then began taunting the disabled boy. Mateus's cries caught the attention of a local policeman, a former friend of his late father. The aggressive man attacked the officer and was subsequently arrested. From his window, Mateus watched as Anka and her mother packed their belongings. Spotting him, Anka ran across the yard to tell him that they were leaving for her grandmother's house. Without the suitor, who had ended up in jail, her mother had no reason to stay. As Anka explained this through the door, Mateus crawled toward the exit. They looked at each other. The gap at the bottom of the door. Mateus tried to say something but couldn't, letting out only a painful groan from his chest. In 2000, Mateus's brother, who served in the Navy, came home on leave. By that time, Matilda was married, and they all gathered at the table, drinking to celebrate the reunion. They discussed how to live together in the same apartment. Matilda brought up the question of what to do with Mateus when their mother was no longer around. She wasn't eager to take on the responsibility of caring for him. Mateus continued to spend his time at the windowsill, observing life in the yard. One day, during an attempt to lift him into his wheelchair, his mother fell to the floor. That marked the end of Mateus's carefree life. His sister and her husband took him to a special care facility already crowded with patients suffering from various conditions. When he arrived at the ward, the residents came to meet him. Mateusz gradually adapted to the institution, hoping his mother would eventually come to take him back. Life in the care home went on, but Mateusz felt out of place. It didn't seem like a place for him. One day, his mother visited him after being discharged from the hospital. She hesitated at the door to his ward before finally entering. After spending some time with him, she prepared to leave to catch her train. She promised to visit on Monday. Realizing he had been abandoned, Mateusz gradually fell into depression, despite the staff's care. Things changed when a new volunteer girl appeared. The sight of her chest brought some solace to Mateusz. Mateusz's mother continues to visit, sharing updates about his brother and sister's lives. However, despite her visits, Mateusz harbors resentment toward her for leaving him home. Overwhelmed with emotion, he even falls from his wheelchair. Following this incident, he is temporarily placed in a padded room and given a boxing helmet to prevent him from accidentally injuring his head. When it becomes clear that Mateusz bites his lips until they bleed while being fed lying down, instead of changing his position to sitting, the doctors restrain him in a dental chair and grind down his teeth. On the way back from the procedure, humiliated and distressed, Mateusz seizes a moment when his caregiver steps away. He rolls his wheelchair to the stairs and falls down them, recalling his father's words. Sometimes when you can't endure anymore, you must slam your fist on the table. Later that year, an orderly brings a new volunteer into Mateusz's ward. This is a test to let her see what she's getting into and decide if she wants to quit. Looking at her, Mateusz knew perhaps breasts aren't the most important thing about a woman after all. Magda takes care of Mateusz and notices that he reacts to her words. One day she plays music in the ward and dances, explaining that this is how she copes with heavy thoughts. An orderly catches them, and Magda argues that Mateusz understands what she's saying, though the orderly remains skeptical. During another bath, Mateusz threw a magazine in the hands of a male nurse, which Magda notices. On Mateusz's 25th birthday, his mother visits with a cake. When Magda arrives, she asks for permission to take Mateusz on outings outside the care home. Not long after, Magda visits Mateusz's ward late at night. She has a gift for him. She brings a magazine, noting his interest in it, and then, after confirming his reaction, she removes her clothing so he can touch her. Later, she takes Mateusz to a Christmas dinner at a restaurant, where her father, stepmother, and guests are gathered. Mateusz is present. Understanding he has been abandoned and exploited, Mateusz listens to music and forces himself to smile to hold back tears. During her his mother shares that his brother is still working as a sailor, and his sister has been left by her husband, now raising 2 children alone. At this point, Mateusz breaks down and starts crying. His mother doesn't understand the real reason behind his sadness, but does her best to comfort him. In the spring of 2008, an outdoor theatrical performance is organized for the residents of the care home. After the show, during a therapeutic massage, Mateusz notices a woman, Mrs. Jola, who teaches disabled individuals to communicate using of signs. Lying on his back, he tries every means available to get her attention, and finally, she talks to him, calming him down. Mrs. Jola develops a communication system based on signs and blinking. His progress and responses astonish the medical staff, who had previously assumed he was intellectually disabled. Before long, Mrs. Jola invites Mateusz's mother and sister to teach them how to communicate with him. The first thing he communicates using the chart is a single phrase: "I am not a vegetable." From that moment, Mateusz's life changes. A dentist makes a prosthesis to replace his ground-down teeth. He is moved to a private room designed to accommodate his preferences. He also receives a motorized wheelchair and can control independently. By 2010, Mateusz is visited by a journalist, Ewa, who wants to write an article about him. He is also introduced to the internet and a computer, enabling him to communicate with people more widely. One day, Mateusz's sister brings him home to meet his nephews and spend time with their brother, who is home on leave. That evening, he sits with his nephew by the window, gazing at the stars, just as he once did with his father. During her next visit, his mother learns from the staff that Mateusz's article has been read by the administration. Since he is not intellectually disabled, he no longer qualifies to stay at the care home. They intend to transfer him to another facility. When his mother informs Mateusz, He is not pleased by the idea of moving. The film circles back to its opening scene. Mateusz is brought before a commission. He does not want to demonstrate that he is capable, so he pretends to behave inappropriately. As Mrs. Jola begins to wheel him out of the room, he suddenly jumps out of the wheelchair and crawls back toward the commission. Turning over, he rises to his feet with great difficulty and walks to the table on his own. In the next scene, Mrs. Jola is seen wheeling Mateusz of the facility for the intellectually disabled, where he has spent the last few years and will remain. The final scene shows Mateusz in his private room, moving his motorized wheelchair toward a telescope. The film ends as Mateusz turns his head toward the camera, looking directly into the viewer's eyes.